Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour tout le monde. Welcome to another of our Pearson Centre podcasts and webinars. We are very lucky to be joined today by the 24th Premier of Ontario, Dalton McGuinty, who was Premier from 2003 to 2013. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that I am on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people, with whom we continue our journey for reconciliation. Um, Before I begin, I'd like to thank our sustaining sponsors. These are the people that keep us going at the Pearson Centre all year long, and we're very grateful. So, MAPCO, the Ontario's Professional Employees Union, Bruce Power, the Canadian Building Trades Union, CBTU, the Cannabis Council of Canada, Fasken, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, Sandstone Group, TikTok Canada, and our media sponsor is National News Watch. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to the wonderful Indira Naidoo Harris, who herself was a former MPP and cabinet minister and a journalist before that, and many other things. But with that, I know they're going to have a wonderful interview. So I will leave you for now and come back at the end. But thank you very much, Indira, and thank you, Dalton, for doing this.
Thank you, Kevin.
Th- Thank you, Kevin. And good afternoon, everyone. Now, Dalton McGuinty, no question, is a familiar name to most Ontarians. That's because Mr. McGuinty was Ontario's Liberal leader for 16 years and our Premier for a full decade. Quite an accomplishment. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that his new book, Be a Good One, Words to Lead By, is a fascinating look at the ups and downs of political life. But this frank look at politics and leadership is done through the lens of a collection of hundreds and hundreds of quotes. And the selection the former premier has collected doesn't disappoint. It's page after page of a who's who of politicians, philosophers, and highly respected individuals. The book offers advice on leadership, advice on conduct that's becoming, advice on how to lead and grow, and finally, in the last chapter, advice on how to be a good one. And while this book is targeted for politicians and others in public life, it is pages of wisdom that's been handed down through the years in the form of quotes. And that wisdom doesn't disappoint. Interestingly enough, in this day of cell phones, tablets, and laptops, this is a book, a small book, but one you can tuck under your arm or in your pocket and walk around with, grabbing inspiration from the quotes throughout your challenging day. And I think that size and portability is intentional. That's because it seems Dalton McGuinty intended this collection of 357 quotes really to be a guide that shines a light on the path forward for politicians as they navigate through the rough waters of politics. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, so let's find out now what the author himself intended. Dalton McGuinty joins us now to talk about his book and why he wrote it and what he hopes future politicians will learn from it. Dalton McGuinty, welcome. It is so good to see you here today. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Pearson Centre for Progressive Policy. And thank you so much for your years of work, commitment, and public service.
Indira, thanks so much for your very generous introduction. It's great to see you again and great to have this opportunity to engage in a bit of a conversation.
So I have to start by asking you why? Why write this book? You've written other books before, but this one in particular, I think, feels a little different. This one focuses specifically on leaders and gives advice through quotations on how to be good leaders. So, how to be good ones. What made you decide to write this book?
Well, Indira, as you mentioned, I was in politics for some time, 23 years in total. My dad was in politics before me. My younger brother David has been there some 20 years now, so it's clearly in the blood. I have fallen in love with the enterprise, with the adventure. Some might say the experiment of democracy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've observed over the many years is that people come into politics with the best of intentions. They are filled with idealism and energy and an earnest desire to do the very best they can on behalf of those they are so privileged to represent. But then they get in, Indira, and they
Yeah.
discover It's not smooth sailing. Oftentimes it's rough waters and dark clouds roll in, and you end up in places and you can end up saying things and doing things that betray your responsibility to be the best version of yourself. Nobody's looking for perfection, but I would argue your responsibility is to be the best version of yourself and to appeal to the best version in your constituents. The good news is that democracies have been around for some 2,500 years. And so I've been collecting quotations for over 30 years. And I thought it would be a good idea to put together a bit of a compendium, a bit of a compass, if you will, to help guide us when we first get in and help us when we're in there as well. So I'm giving a copy, whether they want it or not, to every member of parliament, every senator, every provincial representative, and every big city mayor right across the country. And I've been very pleased to see that there's been interest in this. It's all been fully funded by generous donors, and all the proceeds are going to an education fund for the Ontario Association of Former Parliamentarians to help better educate young people about democracy.
Fantastic. Now, Dalton, you touched on a couple of things, but we know that you were leader for 10 years. And as you mentioned, there are times when there's rough seas and let's just say turbulence, okay? I want to talk a little bit about that because there's no question these are challenging times right now. And it seems like a lot of the challenges that we are facing, wars, polarization, a rise in division, a rise in autocracies, lots of things happening that I think are keeping many people up awake at night. So I have to ask you, did these troubling times to some extent play a role in your decision to write this book? How did we get here? Is it about leadership?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's fair to say that at the 30,000 foot level, democracy in many places around the world, liberal democracies, in those places, democracy is in decline. And I think you can argue with a great deal of objectivity that the US democracy is fraying around the edges right now.
Mhm.
And some of the best advice we have gotten over the years. Remember, my book is not specific to personalities or issues. I don't quote any living person. There's something about the passage of time that brings wisdom into greater relief. And today, we're too given to maybe seizing upon something that is clever or worse, cunning, as representing truth and wisdom when it does not. So all of these that I've curated here stand the test of time, and they transcend time and place. So yeah, I think we're in a bit of a decline right now. And but people have spoken about these kinds of things. We've had various periods of decline over history. We've had authoritarian style leaders over the course of history. They've come and they've gone. And one of the most important lessons this press brought home to me is that, if I might, I'm going to just pick a particular quote here from a
Mhm.
fellow by the name of Edmund Burke. And he said back in 1796, he was an Anglo-Irish statesman and philosopher. He said, manners are of more importance than laws. Upon them, in a great measure, the laws depend. The law touches us but here and now and then. Manners are what vex or soothe, corrupt or purify, exalt or debase, barbarize or refine us by a constant, steady, uniform, insensible operation like that of the air we breathe in. So, what is this guy Burke saying? What did he say to us 300 years ago? He said, and he's not talking about table etiquette here when he talks about manners. He's
Yeah.
talking about social mores. He's talking about our values. And the most important lesson he's trying to impress upon us is foundations don't rest on their constitution. They don't rest on the laws that we build on the constitution. They don't rest on our legislatures. They don't rest on our elected representatives. They don't rest on a free and independent press. They don't rest on even on free elections. They rest on how we treat each other day in and day out. Do we do that with respect and civility and tolerance? And
Hmm.
I just think today, in too many parts of the world, there are too many leaders who are trafficking in and trading in intolerance and disrespect, and they practice a dangerous, divisive style of politics. One of the things that I have the pleasure of being a fellow at a couple of universities, one of the things I tell students is, if you want to be my leader,
Hmm.
don't be a jerk. I can be a jerk on my own.
Yeah.
I can be small and selfish and shallow and short-sighted and mean-spirited and petty. I'm really good at doing that on my own. If you want to be my leader, help me be me. Help us be us at our very best, because there is something noble about our species when we are at our best. We are kind and caring and compassionate and considered and thoughtful and resourceful and resilient and courageous and determined. And at our very best, we're wise.
Yeah.
Help me be that, especially in difficult times when I'm frustrated and angry and I seem to be stuck and I can't get ahead. And I'm dealing with cost of living issues and my kids living in my
Hmm.
basement. And you know what I mean? It's understandable for human beings to grow frustrated. But the kind of leadership we need is the kind that reinforces common ground, brings us together, and inspires us with a hopeful agenda.
But essentially, what you're saying is that to some extent, we are facing right now a real challenge to those foundational values in many ways of integrity and truth and accountability and all of those other things that democracy was built on. And I feel like part of this conversation is about that these things are really under threat of disappearing. So I want to explore that a little bit more. In your book, you say parties will come and go, leaders will come and go, but what counts is how we grapple with the issues of the day. And to some extent, you're also saying how we grapple with them in a way that has, integrity and continues really the values that democracy was built on. Tell me about that.
Well, one of the things that, it's human nature, right? How do we respond in kind?
Yeah.
We respond to heat with heat. We should respond to heat with light. But if somebody's angry, we respond with an angry tone. If somebody is resentful, we respond, with resentment. If
Hmm.
somebody's bitter, we tend to respond with bitterness. We need to, especially our leaders, whose responsibility is to reflect us and appeal to us at our best, is to help elevate the style of interaction, so that we are in fact doing so on the basis of civility. I'm going to give you another quote because
Okay.
that's what I'm now trafficking in these
But
days.
your quotes are great in the book. I've enjoyed them.
So this is a guy by the name of Baruch Spinoza. He's a
Uh-huh.
Dutch philosopher, and in 1677 he said, "I have striven not to laugh at human actions, not to weep at them, nor to hate them, but to understand them." And when, we shouldn't, dismiss and diminish those who hold opposing views and somehow attribute that to a character flaw. No,
Hmm.
they hold a different opinion, and it's our responsibility to try to see the world through their eyes. We've got to lay some kind of a foundation so we can come to build on some common ground. And it's too easy today to dismiss
Yeah.
and diminish and belittle and humiliate. Um, and it's hard work. Democracies, if I could lift it up for a minute, Indira, democracy is hard work. It's slow and messy and cumbersome, and you've got to listen to other people, and it's so inefficient. But as Churchill said, it really is the worst system, except for all the others we've tried from time to time. And I think, to Canadianize it for a moment,
Hmm.
I think we're on the right ground when the question we're trying to ask is not what's in it for me, but rather what do we owe each other?
Yeah.
When we got together in 1812, the French and the English founding peoples and the indigenous peoples and decided we were going to oppose an American invasion, the question we were answering was, what do we owe each other? When we built this country it was a ridiculous proposition. We said to each other, you're going to keep your language and I'm going to keep my language. You're going to keep your system of laws and I'm going to keep my system of laws. You're going to keep your religion, I'm going to keep my religion. And we're going to do something completely outrageous. We're going to found a country on the notion that we can find strength in diversity, almost unheard of in the annals of human history. And the question we were answering was, what do we owe each other? When we built a railroad, when we fought in the two world wars, when we turned to address in a sincere way the issue of reconciliation, when
Hmm.
we've been at our best as a nation and as a people, the question we've been trying to answer is not what's in it for me, but rather, what do we owe each other?
Yet here we are today. I mean, we're facing a world right now where some of these pieces that you're talking about, working together, listening to each other, understanding that we are different, but that difference can actually inform us about things we hadn't considered before and build a stronger foundation for the path forward. But here we are, and you mentioned this yourself to some extent. We're facing a world where those foundational values of democracy are at risk. Uh, how did we get here, and what do we need to do now as a country, and also, you know, uh, a world out there to ensure that we are creating, a bright, successful future for our kids, our grandkids, and so on. What do you think it all gets down to at this point?
Well, I think one of the biggest threats to democracy today and I think this is worldwide, is economic inequality
Yeah.
and people struggling to get ahead. And just in my lifetime, Indira, I can recall Terry and we did everything the wrong way, and it all worked out. I should have called my first book that instead of making a difference. But I remember, just to give you one little anecdote, we were bringing our third baby home, and Terry says, we have got to get out of this one bedroom apartment. And but I always believed that, you know what, we're going to find a way to get ahead. We're just going to find a way. I don't see that sense of underlying optimism in younger generations today.
No.
And I think we have a responsibility in positions of leadership to recognize that issue and to find a way to address that left on its own. Because there's always been kind of, I think, an unwritten bargain. And the bargain is this: I'm going to get a lousy job if I have to. I'll get lousy pay. I'll get lousy benefits, probably no pension, lousy holidays. I'll grind out my life on two conditions. Number one, I'll be able to get ahead at least a little bit. And you see my daughter, she's 8 years of age. She's going
Hmm.
to do better than me. I'm going to work really hard. She's going to go to college or university, and she's going to do better than me. That's the deal. If you rob people of that hope, of that sense of the possibility, you leave them vulnerable to false prophets who say, I told you the system doesn't work.
Yeah.
You don't want me to go to government in order to rearrange furniture. You want me to go into government to break up the furniture. So if you are a champion of democracy, if you believe in it being the best system of government, then you need to recognize that underlying frustration and this disruptive potential it holds, and you
Hmm.
need to find a way to address that. But how we get there
Yeah.
is also important. You don't divide. That's cheap and easy. You've got to find a way to unite. You've got to find a way to build on common ground. You have to govern yourself in a way that speaks to civility. Let me tell you another story, if I might. I
Sure.
traffic in stories as well as quotes now. But one of my favorite quotes in here is, the universe is not made up of atoms, it's made up of stories.
Hmm.
Somebody will say to me, hey, McGuinty, I was there. You gave a speech 30 years ago. I say, okay, what did I say? I'll say, I don't know, but you told a story about your mother I never forgot.
Yes.
People connect to stories. Anyway, there was a very old story about a young man who is troubled. And he
Hmm.
goes to see the wisest person in the village, an elder. And he says, I got a problem. And she says, talk to me. He says, well, when it comes to my family and friends, sometimes I just love them so much, there's not enough I can do for them. Other days, they kind of, tick me off so much, I want to cause them pain. What is wrong with me?
Mm.
She says, I'll tell you what's wrong with you. Inside you, there are two dogs fighting. One's a kind dog, and the other is a mean dog. So the young man says, well, which dog is going to win?
Yeah.
And her answer is that all depends on which dog you decide to feed.
Hmm.
The moral of the story is twofold. For each and every one of us, we have to make a decision every day as to which dog we're going to feed, which version of ourselves we're going to be.
Yeah.
But for leaders, they've got to make a decision as to which dog they're going to make appeal, right? I
Right.
want you, if you want to be my leader, if you want to
Yes.
assume your responsibility with integrity and good character,
Yeah.
speak to what is best to me. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm resentful. I'm stuck.
Hmm.
I can't get ahead. My kids can't get ahead. You need to find a way to recognize that, but not to foster it, not to exploit it, not to
No.
leverage it, but rather to speak to what is best in me and provide me with some reassurance and hope.
So this book, as you mentioned, is really about ethics, integrity, and sticking to your values, right? And you're talking to leaders and talking about the fact that as they face the storm in terms of the demands that will come your way, it's important that you really stay true to those values. So I'm going to change the line of questioning here a little bit and ask you to what was your biggest challenge, Dalton McGuinty? One that you found yourself, really having to face where you were tested. And how did you deal with that when you were grappling with your values and what to do? Was there one quote? Was there, some conversation you had with yourself that helped you get to the next step? It's important, I think, for people to understand that leaders like yourself who were so good at what you were doing, had these struggles and navigated through these storms in certain ways.
Well, I think maybe the most important lesson that I learned throughout the course of my political career
Hmm.
is that you need to be mindful of what people think about you, but you need to be even more mindful of what you think about you.
Yeah.
At one point in time, your political career will be in the rear view mirror. Graveyards are filled with indispensable people. It took them about 15 minutes to replace me, figuratively speaking. But I recall making the announcement to the caucus. And after
Yeah.
that meeting, Indira, I was
Yes.
talking to people and they're looking over my shoulder. It's like, who's next? That's
Yes.
just the way it works. And that's healthy and it's in the natural order of things. But I can tell you one of the toughest experiences I had in politics was at the beginning. I made a commitment. I wasn't going
Hmm.
to raise taxes. I said I'm going to invest heavily in
Yeah.
healthcare and education. We're going to restore vigor and vitality to those fundamental public services, and I'm going to be able to do it because I'm not going to raise your without raising your taxes. And I recall signing a pledge with a flourish on TV.
Right.
Now, I had consulted bank economists who had told me ahead of time that the books were in good shape and that over the course of time we could make these investments in a prudent, fiscally responsible manner without running a deficit. In those days, deficits mattered. That doesn't seem to
Hmm.
be the case much anymore. But anyway, so I get in and I get a meeting with the Secretary of Cabinet, who's the head of the Ontario Public Service, and says, Premier, I need to tell you something. You're in fact running a $6 billion deficit.
Oh my gosh.
It's been hidden. So I had a choice now, all right, which
Yeah.
is either to raise taxes, break that promise, or
Hmm.
abandon my commitment to improve healthcare and education.
Yeah.
So the decision I made, and I took longer than I should have to make that decision, because one of the other things I've learned is if you have to swallow a toad, don't stare at it for too long. It doesn't get any more appetizing, right? If you know you're going to go there, go there. So eventually I got there, made the decision that I would put in place a new Ontario health premium. All those monies were devoted to new investments in healthcare. I should have given the opposition and the right-wing media a two by four to beat me about the head and shoulders for the next 4 years, which they happily did. But I got another majority.
Yeah.
And I got a majority because I told people what happened and what I was doing, and they had a choice. If they decided they didn't like what I had done and didn't like the results I was getting in healthcare and education, there was an alternative. That's the great thing about a democracy. There was an alternative. And they
Right.
decided that no, that they understood what I had done and why I had done it, and they were going to stick with me for the time being. But it
And
was a
that's
painful coming of age experience in politics.
and such a great story. And essentially, you're saying, at the end of the day, you spoke from the heart. You didn't try to cover it up. You didn't
No.
think, oh, how is this message going to work or that message going to work? You decided to just be honest and forthright about what the situation was and the pathways to some extent that
Yeah.
you were having to face.
I
You
think
start the book talking about the calling, and I feel like this next little bit here fits in quite well with what you were just saying, Dalton McGuinty. The book, one of the quotes you have in this earlier section, which is the calling, and we were talking about your early decisions when you got into politics and became premier. A quote by Rabindranath Tagore. In
mhm,
that section, he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. So, looking back on those years and your experiences, I have to ask you, what was your decision in the end? I mean, there were a lot of ups and downs, and it was quite a road over that
yeah,
decade. Was service joy to you at the end of it all?
absolutely. I love that quote. It would be one of my top favorites of all time. There's so much wisdom in there. And I think, one of the things that you need,
Hmm.
you need to steel yourself because, as everybody understands, in politics offers more than its fair share of cynicism
Yeah.
and toxicity. It can be corrosive. And the only way to guard against that is to arm yourself with a strong idealism. I never lost faith in the goodness of people. I always felt, people would tell me either explicitly or implicitly all the time that they were cynical, that they had seen it all, heard it all. There's nothing new under the sun. They couldn't be impressed, and they sure as hell couldn't be inspired by you, by me, McGuinty. I get that. But here's what I learned about people. They layer on this cynicism like a thin veneer to guard themselves against life's inevitable disappointments. Life is at some point in time going to let all of us down. I get that. I understand that. But beneath that thin layer of cynicism, there is something that tells us life is very short.
Hmm.
And we'd like to know that it counted for something. We were part of something bigger than just ourselves. We did something of enduring value for others.
Yeah.
And I think the best political leaders understand that and they drill into that and they call upon that. And the fact of the matter is, while we are encountering our share of frustrations and democratic decline
Yeah.
today in the world, Indira,
Yeah.
never have we had more girls in school.
That's
Never have we
true.
had fewer poor people as a percentage of the population. Never have people lived for so long. Never has there been, this is hard to believe, but it's true, less conflict. So we are making progress.
Hmm.
And so if people, despair,
Yes.
they should recognize that reality. And maybe this brings me to something else, which I think is incumbent upon our leaders. Our leaders need to be hopeful.
And that's the section in your book. Hope.
Absolutely. Yeah. They need to be hopeful. And my favorite definition of hope comes from a guy by the name of Wordsworth a couple hundred
Yes.
years ago. He said,
Yes. One of my favorites.
yeah, he just said, hope. I'll just use the beginning of the quote because it makes it shorter. Hope is the paramount duty. Hope's not a
Hmm.
choice, it's not an option, it's an obligation. And I think that, and I distinguish hope,
Yeah.
which is an active verb, from optimism. Optimism is a feeling, is a feeling.
Yes.
Hope is active, and it means you don't have neat and tidy answers for complex problems, but it means you have faith in our capacity to work together, to access whatever resources we need. I'm talking about intellectual resources and ideas and those kinds of things, and to
Right.
come together and to begin to lay a path to make progress.
So would you say that hope is something right now that perhaps people around the world are grappling with a little bit, and certainly younger people, that there seems to be uh, a bit of a storm forming to some extent, and not trying to not be hopeful, but I'm just saying to you that I feel that when I talk to a young person and they're talking about climate change and they're talking about how we get along with each other, and people are becoming more divided and polarized and so on, it seems that that concept of hope is starting to slowly break down
Yeah,
and starting to dissolve.
yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. I think there's, at minimum, a sense of malaise,
Yeah.
but sometimes more than that, a sense that we are in a real decline.
Mm-hmm.
And I can recall, as a little bit of a just really a personal experience, during the 2008 financial crisis, our caucus would come together regularly, as you do in government and in opposition. And a caucus is kind of like representing branch plants right across the province or the country, and they collect information, and more than that, they collect moods
Oh.
and feelings, and they bring those back into the caucus room.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I recall when we were talking about this issue and how we might confront it, there was a
Mm-hmm.
lot of dark talk and not a lot of light.
Right.
So I recall at one point pointing to the window and saying, people out there can despair on their own. We've
Yeah.
not been hired on to despair for them. Our
Mm-hmm.
job as leaders is to give them reasons to be hopeful. That's a job.
Yes.
So I know that people are succumbing to that sense of malaise, but we need to
Mm-hmm.
give people reasons to be hopeful. We need to lay paths to progress. We need to remind them of our history and how well we have done.
Right.
And we also, I think, from time to time, need to remind them that it often takes hard work to get ahead, and we shouldn't be reluctant to do that hard work together.
So you're actually going to my next question, and we're getting ready to wrap things up a bit.
Okay.
But of course, you were the leader of the provincial Liberals, and you've created this book right now, which is about giving advice and wisdom to future leaders, of the world, through quotations and sort of that collection of wisdom that you've put down on paper. So I have to ask you, what is the most important bit of advice that you would give now to the next incoming leader of the provincial Liberals?
I think that, well, I'm reminded of a quote. I don't think I have it in the book, but one of the ancient Greeks said, nobody can cross the same stream twice because it's not the same stream and you're not the same person.
Okay.
So things change. And
Yes.
I think that my advice to a new leader would be you don't want to, certainly do not want to imitate what any leader has done in the past in any kind of a precise and specific way. I think you need to be mindful of the times,
Mm-hmm.
mindful of this age of concerns and issues and anxieties. I think you need to listen and go
Yes.
to ground, especially in opposition. That's a luxury you don't enjoy in government. You are consumed by the immediate and the urgent. In opposition, you can go to ground. You can travel around the province. You can listen to people, get them into small groups. I think we underestimate the value of listening as leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the world is your oyster. In the age of the internet, I used to drive my staff crazy. I would come back in the morning and say, "Have you seen what they're doing in South Korea? What about Singapore? What about Sweden? Why aren't we
Yes.
talking about those things, right?" So
Yes.
there's all kinds of good things taking place in the world. I know that, as they say,
Yes.
bad news takes the elevator and good news takes the stairs. But
So
there's a
we
lot
can
of good
learn
news.
from others. Apologies. I was saying so we can learn from others is what you're saying by listening and
Absolutely.
paying attention.
Absolutely. And bring initiative, bring a sense of optimism, bring determination, and reflect us at our best.
Well, finally, wrapping up now, I'd like to end with a quote that you actually started with, a Robert Frost quote. Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So I have to ask you, has your choice of a less traveled road made all the difference to you? And how do you feel about that? Any regrets?
I feel lucky. I think everybody knows if we were to draw up two lists right now, one list of all the reasons to go into politics, and
Yes.
the other of all the lists to stay 100 miles away from politics, the second list would be much longer. Why remove yourselves from the comfort, convenience, and anonymity of the stands? Why go into the arena? Because it's incredibly rewarding. And
Yeah.
it's a huge privilege and honor to be in a position to serve. I think we all want to do something of enduring value with our lives. We want to make a difference for others. And there are all kinds of ways to do that. But I found politics to be an incredibly rewarding pursuit.
Wow, those are amazing words to end with. Thank you, Dalton McGuinty. I must tell you that in our fast-paced world filled with constant input, laptop, cell phones, social media, this book stands out. It's easy to read, easy to carry. And, when you're feeling a little troubled about the times we're in, and I actually found myself doing that several times over the last week, you can read in the book, find a quotation, that speaks to your challenge and gives you some inspiration and so important right now and hope, as you said.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining us here today. These are definitely good words to lead by, and I truly appreciate you being with us and sharing your thoughts about this book and about your life. Thank
Thanks
you.
for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I'm going to close off then, and thank you, Dalton, for that amazing interview. I'm not surprised at all that you wrote this book that collects this together, this incredible philosophy over a lifetime of politics and political service. Your personal integrity, I think, has always been your hallmark. I've certainly been impressed with the respectful, optimistic, kind approach that you bring to politics, and I've always personally admired that. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for taking the time to join our podcast today. And thank you, Indira. What can I say? A wonderful and insightful interview. Indira is also the vice president of the Pearson Centre, so we're very delighted that beyond her many experiences, she also is working with us, and that we get to continue to use your interviewing talents for many years to come. So I'd like to thank both
Yeah.
of you for taking time to do this today. Again, I want to thank our sustaining sponsors, AMAPSIO, Ontario's professional employees, Bruce Power, the Canadian Building Trades Union, Cannabis Council of Canada, Fasken, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, Sandstone Group, TikTok Canada, and our media sponsor, National News Watch, in conjunction with Spark and North Star Public Affairs. So thank you very much to everyone. Merci tout le monde, and we'll see you again later. Thank you.